Manhood, brought to you in part by Solomon's Bespoke. Manhood, brought to you in part by Reboot Sports Drink.
Welcome to another conversation here on Manhood. The topic today is vulnerability. Do we know how to express our emotions? Why don't we sometimes express our emotions? Do we even know how sometimes to express those emotions? Why don't we ask for directions? All these little things that come up comes under the context of vulnerability and how that connects and relates to being a man. So to my right, it's a bit of a shocker this time. You might normally see Johan say there, but to my right today is a friend, Alan Charles, also known as Trini Surfer. Welcome to the conversation. Really good to have you. And to his right, Johan Ayodike, Behavior Change Consultant. So we're getting straight into it. Vulnerability. I want to start off by saying that, just in the topic alone, Alan, Johan was one of ironically vulnerability to even start the conversation, to somehow say the words. And then you start to realize, we'd laugh and joke about it in certain ways about why men don't ask for directions or why men don't really reach out to other men when they're going through problems and,
Right.
and what are some of the reasons behind it. And as I was sharing with you, Johan and Alan, earlier before, and we always say that whatever we discuss off camera, we discuss on camera because this is a real program. There's no point hiding things. We're not trying to be somebody that we're not. This is not an alter ego type program. It's who we are and what we think and when we think it. In itself and in essence being vulnerable. And I would say that a couple weeks ago I was really in a state of where am I going in life? What am I doing? What's my next step? Why are people thinking this particular way? And I didn't reach out to anyone. And then a friend of mine called the next morning, and I just happened to spit it out, like how people say, "How are you?" but they're really not interested in your response. I just kind of said, "Well, I was feeling a little yesterday," and then went to move on with the topic. And he said, "No, hold on, what happened?" And I kind of still brushed it off. And then after a couple moments, I kind of shared with him a bit more as to how I was feeling. Whether it be imposter syndrome, every time you succeed. Is it as a shadow, and you still don't know that even after 20 years of doing this, that when you get the accolades or commendations and all these other things, people giving you positive feedback, you're still like, yeah, well, I don't know how I pull that one off, but okay, if you feel that particular way. And the next, so in chatting with him, I was like, he looked at me and he said, well, why don't you reach out to anybody? And my first thing was, I sit here on this show every week, and I talk to people and try to, express why we should be doing it as a brotherhood, why we should be vulnerable. And there it was, the moment I should have been doing it myself, I didn't do it. And I felt really about not even taking,
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I'll say this, and then we could start to develop it. Most times when a man is being vulnerable, when I see a man being vulnerable, what I see most times is a little child speaking. So Robert, you were speaking, and I was seeing almost the young Robert speaking. I remember once I was in a therapy session with my therapist, and it was online, so I could see myself. And even when I was speaking, I was looking at myself, and I was seeing young, like little Johanse talking. And I realized is that many of us have these wounds from childhood, right? And I using wounds generally because different situations, different kinds of wounds, but that would in some way told us or convinced us that we are not enough in some way, or us being our honest selves in some way is wrong, or it wouldn't bring us value, or it was shut down by someone, or anything along those lines. So of course, if we were emotionally stunted at that age, whatever age that was, every time it comes up, we would react it like a child. Because let's just say the mature thing to do, and I've been victim to this too, is to reach out. You don't know, ask a question.
Yeah,
that's
that's sensible.
They're right, that's the
sensible
mature thing to do.
Yeah.
But because a lot of us stuck in this 6-year-old, 8-year-old state that didn't get that emotional development, we often act like children. Tell me your thoughts.
No, definitely. Like when it comes to being vulnerable as a man too, of course, across the board is different for everybody growing up. But in essence, you are correct that it can be portrayed or in our minds as coming across as like a child or a younger person, or even sometimes how we might portray it may not come across as like emotionally intelligent enough at that point in time. And that is, for a lot of fellas, the product of their upbringing or how we supposed to act or how we supposed to be, or even how our parents might have been around us as
Right.
men coming up as opposed to maybe girls and that kind of thing when they are younger. And but it's good. It is good that these days, hopefully, people are feeling a little more like, men, I say people, men,
Yeah.
can start to break through that, let's say, stereotype or that taboo feeling that it's less manly to be vulnerable and more so to kind of express yourself in a proper way,
And I think that Alan is a really important one for us to constantly remind each other, and also the wider public, and even our partners, our friends, for women also to understand that and embrace that. You used to hear things growing up from a societal aspect. When you hear bad man don't smile, that in itself is something, or big man don't cry. And that could be coming from not just maybe your father or your parents, but from your friends or your environment or your community. And then you start to understand, okay, well, to be a man means that I can't be doing these things. But even though I mightn't express, if for example, I have a sharp pain, right? I might want to cry, but because I don't cry doesn't mean it's not hurting.
Yeah.
Right.
So and because now I find ways to suppress that, it means I'm still going through the emotion, but I'm not allowed to show it.
Listen, Robert, you've seen it, and it's sounding real now.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that I want to cry, but I can't cry, but I should cry.
Yeah.
So then what you do now, and you end up in this place of confusion, which at this point I realize is just to do it, because if honestly, like whether it is cry, whether it is express weakness, wherever it is, if in that moment that's what you really want to do, then you have to do it. Because and if your partner, your friends, your family member, whoever don't accept you, well, what you do, you just get information now to know, well, this person is not the person to be vulnerable around. You can't expect support. But I realize at this stage it don't make any sense keeping it inside.
Because you use the word, Johan, so just now, sometimes you want to cry, right? Now, there's a difference between want and need. Sometimes you need to cry.
Yeah,
You need that purge. Even a pressure cooker at some point,
But when that time comes too, you can't. Sometimes you really can't stop it, huh? There'll
You
come a
can't.
point, no matter how much. And I'm a person to be honest, I don't cry very much, especially since I was younger. And the other day, randomly, one of our cats died, and I stayed strong, or what I thought I had to be at that point. My wife went to bed, and I sleep in a separate room at that point because the baby was in the room with her, and I had to work the next morning. So we have a little side room where I could sleep in case babies keep you up at night. And I sat down in that room and just thinking, and tears coming on, and for a good hour in sleep, I just let go now, by myself. And it's not because I was necessarily trying to hide it from my wife or anything like that, but I've thought to myself, lying on it, I was like, when's the last time I even shed a tear? Yes?
Right.
And then I was like, it's cool, you love the animal, it is a part of your family, it's not no problem. But I did think, while being sad, that, most of the time, I don't really want to bother this, or I try not to bother with any kind of crying thing for other situations. But it overwhelmed me at that time. I was like, no, I can't fight this back.
Did you feel in that moment afterwards, like, even though it might have been cathartic for you, did you feel afterwards that you're glad you did it in that space and that not in front of her?
To an extent, yes, I will admit, like, even when it happened to, I mean, my wife was flat out crying. So I was hugging her. So I had some teary eyes into her. Not that she was even watching or bothering me at that point. She had other things to think about. And in my mind, I did think that it's kind of nice, again, this moment to myself to let it out. And everything you're saying is interestingly true. Like, I thought in that moment as well to, like, what would it be like if I was crying in front of her right now? And you know how would that look? And I like to believe that, of course, it's okay, but there's still something pulling down inside of me. That's like, is it really okay?
Well, I don't know, and this is something I explore in. Is it really okay? That's what we are told. We're told that you're supposed to be able to cry in front of women, right? Who's not your mother, because crying in front of your mother different. Mommy is mommy. No matter what age you are, your mother have a certain degree of unconditional love for you and acceptance in that way. And the relationship dynamic is different between son and mother. But now husband and wife, father and daughter, right? That's a different dynamic of, I think, dependability and strength. And then some people argue, well, it's strong to cry. Now, thus far, I have tested some of these things, right, to really see. And even men I know, we intentionally test some of these things to see. And thus far, the result is you shouldn't really cry in front of a woman that's depending on you.
So as in
I
Alan's
believe that
case,
too, by the way.
you know, his wife is crying, you know, grieving over the cat, right? And he's hugging her, and at that moment, it's not your moment to also express that, because both you crying will be a purge, but is it really at that point, even though you're purging, is she now feeling comforted? The fact that you're also grieving with that person, and therefore somebody has to be that pillar of strength.
100%.
And the man, even though you are equally emotional, you know, is it that there's something that's then built in to allow for that? I don't think so, because there are times I might be watching something and really start to tear up and asking myself, is it the show that's tearing up? Is it triggering something in the background? But you find yourself immediately like, you know, because it can't be seen as you know, as a sign of, like you mentioned, a sign of weakness. And that's what you're being conditioned to do. And in your case, you know, I like, as you mentioned, and a really, really strong point there. You're a new father, Alan. You know, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful thing.
Boy.
But at the same time, as much as it's wonderful, it's also the areas of, it's scary at the same time. Your heart is now outside your body, and you are now very vulnerable. And you now have to be a particular way, as the wife can be very open and show her emotions. You are there trying, you know, you're not going to break down and cry in front of your son.
No, not just so at all.
And so you have two roles that I want you to talk about as it pertains to vulnerability. One, being a new father and some of the concerns and that you may have with regards to that. And also being an influencer. You know, what you do, you're opening yourself a lot of times to people in disagreement, but very vocal disagreement.
Yeah, and trolls and haters and this and that. You have to make a very clear decision if you're putting yourself in the public's eye you better come in there, and plenty people don't. You better come in with thick skin on your back and that kind of thing, because if you can't take that licks and put things into perspective, you're in for a bad time.
Because, Alan, that is actually the definition of vulnerability. You know, vulnerability means putting yourself in a position of possible danger and harm. That's exactly that's what vulnerability means. So once in the public eye, the public view, where anybody could type a comment, anybody could say what they want. You're putting yourself in that vulnerable
In fact,
position.
people will frequently, and I mean, me as a content creator / whatever influencer, I'm much more of a neutral one, mostly positive compared to some of the other people out there. And even me, I get quite attacked, and it's not even within reason. Sometimes people set up and come after you just because that's their intention. They don't actually have a problem with anything. They might have their own problem in life, and social media is an easy outlet to target or vent or be racist or be whatever to somebody without too much repercussion. And so cyberbullies, anything, bacchanal, anything. And in Trinidad, we like that plenty. Before we move forward, I just want to touch on something you said as well too. Coming back to the is it okay to be overly emotional in front of women, especially women who depend on you, your wife, and that kind of stuff? And the answer is not no, but you're absolutely right. Is that in this society today, you hear a lot of that being repeated. Men need to be more in touch with their feminine side, or men need to cry more, or whatever. But if you're really, at least from my experience or from what I could see, even if my wife were to watch me in my face and tell me it's okay for you to be vulnerable and cry in front of me. I was like, I don't think you believe that, because the day that it plays into your hands,
Exactly.
you're going to
Listen,
tell me I'm a little sissy man or something.
exactly.
Or when
Might
you
be
not
at that point,
Exactly.
but in her mind,
and it's tricky, yeah.
that is going to trigger, like, she might even understand why all of a sudden.
It's primal.
Correct. And, and
Exactly.
You, and,
Yeah.
and you hear things like toxic masculinity, and women say all the time is when a man isn't being manly enough or meeting her needs, and she goes into survivor mode, is when it triggers this need to now compensate. And who's to say when she sees that, it's like, wait, now, is this man going to really be in that moment that I need him, that strength and that pillar? And again, there's a difference between conscious and subconscious. But I want us to talk more about it we need to go to a break. But before we go to the break, I really wanted you to, we spoke more about the influencer side of things, but what
tell
about
me.
the vulnerability as a new father?
So, I mean, I hope you have 5 more hours to tackle. If you want to get into father thing, I'll start by saying this, because I've told this to a few friends, I think, repeatedly since I became a father. I am a man who came up with no set. I'm luckily not have too much mental health issues. I don't really have no set of anxiety. I'm very whatever when it comes to life, which is good, because it helps you beat off all life's problems most of the time. Not that I don't have any. But from the time, in fact, before my son was born, pregnancy hit me a good slap in the face, and all the worry was born within me. Will my child be okay? Is my wife going to be okay? Is she going to survive the pregnancy? All of a sudden, these problems I never had came.
10 fingers, 10 toes, as they say.
Yeah,
Okay.
healthy baby. And then I was like, cool, the baby born, great. What? One time, more anxiety, because now every single day, I want my son to grow up okay. I hope he don't choke on the food. I hope, right now I'm talking to you all, and I hope everything cool at home, because there's nothing more critical than him and his life now, and there's nothing I fear more than anything going wrong with my son, because that will destroy me personally. Like, I don't know what I'll do, and I tell my wife all the time, as a little bit of joke, but a lot of truth can be said in jest sometimes, and she feels the same way, and I'm going to say it to the camera right now, because she's probably watching this, I love my wife, I love my family, but you don't know nothing like when you love your child. And I know my wife loved that child more than me, and I understand 100%, because you can't love nothing more than something you've created that is born into your life, Different love.
So I want us to talk more about that, because I have something that I want to share with you and, of course, our listeners and audience about what somebody said with regards to where the child fits into your life, even though you can't help it. But, I really appreciate the vulnerability, gents, that we're sharing here this morning. Sure. So this is Manhood. We're taking a short break, and we'll come back. We're discussing vulnerability.
All right, guys, welcome back to Manhood, and we're talking about vulnerability today. But before we dive back into everything, I want to just say something that comes up all the time on social media. It's come up here as well, too. So I want to address it in front of everybody now. The topic of influencers, but I'm not going to talk about influencers. I'm talking about me, because I can't speak on behalf of anybody else ever, right? There's always this accusation online of people being liars and getting paid to lie to the public about products and businesses. That because, of course, as an influencer, you go and you recommend things to people. And people always say, well, obviously they're taking money and they go say whatever. And then that person might check it and they have a bad experience, and they come back to you like you's a big liar now. As if we all live the same experience every time. If you go to a pizza one day and I go to the same pizza and it tastes better to me the next day, how I going to tell you you's a liar that your own wasn't bad or good, But anyway, to answer you, the viewers and everybody in this room, how I operate, because you tell me I don't ever really put up nothing negative. Now, I'm not a food critic. I don't go in to tell you whether the food lacks salt or anything like that. I'm a very easygoing person. I like most food, and how it works is like this. When people reach out for me to do an advertisement, let's say they own a pizza place. And of course, money is going to pass because I use my following to help people market. I need money to pay my rent and my bills and feed my child and everything. This is not a free will, right? So that's the first thing. But Alan, how can you take money and then be honest about something? Well, first of all, I vet the place that is hiring me in advance. I check out their social media. I see what's going on beforehand to make sure that, first of all, it's looking up to standard. Secondly, I go in there and the owners or whoever I'm dealing with know in advance that when I go to eat this food or whatever it is, if it is there's a problem, I get sick, it's really terrible, there's something horrible about it, you take back your money, no video again posts, we wash our hands of it, end of story. It's very simple. Yes, money is important in life, and I'm not so desperate for money that I have to put out a video stating that something that made me throw up or sick is good just because I've got a little cash in my pocket.
That's a real good point, Alan. So for everybody to understand, you have decided, listen, you want to put out things that are positive and uplifting. And therefore, even though we all need money, right? You've decided that, listen, so it's not a case of that you only put out whatever you get paid for is a positive message. It's like, even if you get paid and the review isn't good or something happens, you simply give back the money and you move along. So it's not like you never have bad experiences. You just don't take money, or you decide, I'm not going to post this, and you give back the money for that. So it's not like anybody could come, like there might be a burger that you don't like.
Yeah.
So it's not like I can pay you to come and review that burger, and then you don't like it, and then you post and you say it's good. It's a matter of honesty, vulnerability.
Well, the thing is, the fact that Alan even have to explain this shows that vulnerability is not even appreciated in the society. People ask for it, but then it's not reciprocated in a positive manner, because social media, how each person have their own account, right? You could run your social media however you want,
exactly.
right? In theory, right?
Yes.
No, here it is, in theory.
Yeah.
But people want you to run your social media the way they think it should.
Agreed.
And when you be vulnerable, I mean, I do whatever I feel to do. Whatever brings me joy, whatever. Whether it is food, whether it is I walking down the road with my dog, wherever it is, you have a choice to do it. But people don't revere the vulnerability. So now, and this is where sometimes even as a man, it becomes kind of oxymoronic, right? Because I want to be vulnerable, but I am not rewarded for it. That is one. And then two, I remember a cousin of mine he does neuroscience, right? And we were discussing the difference between men and women and emotions. And he was saying, after doing research, that it's not that men don't feel emotions. Is that the reward system of our brain is different for emotions. So when a woman expresses an emotion, the brain rewards her for doing it. But when a man does it, it's a different kind of reward. We are not as rewarded for it. I think I seen it correct. If I'm not saying it correct, don't get vexed with me.
Right.
But I understood it, because even when you said, I went and cried afterwards, and that felt good, because many times I'm okay with crying, but I prefer to do it after. It's time to myself. It's not even I want to hide from anybody. It's just at the moment it is not rewarding for me to break down in front. If I need to be strong for my grandmother or whoever, even sometimes my client. And I'll give you a quick story. I remember there was a client I had, a female, and she experienced multiple rapes. Right? And when she would tell me some of these stories, listen, it was breaking my heart now. Right? And I was feeling sad, I was feeling angry, I was feeling a lot of things. And I felt tears coming. But in the moment, I was like, this is not valuable. There's my opinion. It may have been, but it's my opinion. And then when she finished, close to the end of the session, she said, Johan, she said, this may sound bad, but I went to a therapist before, and that person shed tears and even cried at some of my stories. And that didn't help me, She actually said that. She said, I'm glad. She said, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm glad you didn't break down. And I was like, that's counter to what I've heard women say. Now, of course, this is one woman. She can't speak for all women. But when she left, I understood it. I understood in many situations, the role of a man in many situations is to be strong. But you could be vulnerable after. You could be, and this is what I've encountered in research. Many women prefer to be vulnerable after the fact. So when this thing happening, you have to stay stoic and like a rock. But if you come and say maybe an hour, 2 hours the next day, baby, that make me real sad. But that is more appreciated than you emoting in the moment.
So you mentioned something that I wanted to, just for clarification, when you said about it being oxymoronic. Is it that because vulnerability, based on the meaning that you expressed earlier, would be that you are leaving yourself open to criticism and not necessarily being okay with that, but you're putting yourself in a situation that you know is not known to be a safe space.
Or the possibility of not being safe.
Possibility of not being safe. So if you're expecting reward, then are you really being vulnerable? Because if you have an expectation of some sort of reward or some sort of, it's like you're expecting that safe space.
No, the reward is brain is based on biology. So let me explain. We have now it's slipping my mind. We have hormones and chemicals in our body that give us rewards. So we know dopamine when they do something good, right? So think about it like this. When a female cries, and not exact, but I just give an example. When a female cries, she's rewarded with a lot of dopamine to feel good. When a man does, we are not. This is biologically.
Right. So then I'm coming down to, it may be perceived vulnerability, right? But is it really to the core being vulnerable? Because if she's crying, she's expressing, she's what we then perceive as, okay, well, she's being vulnerable at this point. But to her, she's just crying. If she knows that the result or the dopamine is going to kick in and she's going to feel good, that's a learned experience. And also the reaction that she might get from someone is to know that if I break down and cry here now, or me crying, it's a safe space, because if I cry, he's going to console me. So it's not them being vulnerable, because they're not exposing themselves.
So you're saying because of learned behavior, they know it's safe, then they're not really being vulnerable. Okay, all right.
It's for vulnerability, if there's such a term. Right, vulnerability at the core, which is what we're discussing, like here in this particular context, is where you're truly out of control of what is happening, and you're just like, listen, I have reached my tether with this, and I am breaking down and crying, and let the chips fall where they may. Or in Alan's case, you put something out there and you don't know what the response is going to be, but you're okay with it because of where you're centered. And that in itself is vulnerability, but we can also, in certain cases, we can also tie that in with a certain amount of ego, where you could be like, I simply just don't give a what people think, and therefore...
That's definitely me there.
Yeah,
to an extent.
To an extent, yeah. But even in that, then again, is it to the core vulnerability? Because if you don't give a what somebody thinks,
yeah, that could still be vulnerable. Because if you go in with the dictionary meaning of vulnerable, even though I don't care what nobody think, it's still very possible. I still open myself to the criticism, even though it may
you
not,
don't care.
It may not bother me.
So therefore, it at that point, it's simply I'm putting this out there. It might be perceived vulnerability, like, wow, look, he's exposing himself.
And you see what you're doing there, Robert? That's what I realized, that when we have these words, there are the literal meaning of the words, and then there's the human meaning and the dynamics that people put on it.
Right.
And even doing the research on vulnerability. So this morning, this is all happenstance, stumble upon a video on vulnerability, and from a psychologist I follow, and he was saying that many men make the mistake and talk about their feelings and their shortcomings and everything that's wrong with them to a woman and call it vulnerability. Whereas you're just and hoping that this person accepts you for who you are, right? And he was saying in that aspect, it pedestalizes the person, so makes them almost like a god or a guru to you, which you put that person above you, which of course now opens you to a whole different kind of dynamics.
Expose,
right?
Vulnerability is very similar to exposing.
So he was saying that's not necessarily vulnerability. Vulnerability, that's just asking somebody for forgiveness, asking somebody to accept you, versus saying your truth, right?
Exactly.
Saying your truth and then let it lie. So that was a mind-blowing thing for me, because people who told me about vulnerability, in most cases, especially male to female, is, I tell you, well, what wrong with me, I was feeling bad and thing versus just, or saying something like, I'm angry right now. because that's vulnerability also,
Yeah.
right?
You just coined it there for me. So when we talk about vulnerability in a full context, whether it be weakness, whether it be strength, whatever it is simply living your truth. So whatever is true to you at that moment is being true to yourself and being honest enough to be able to express that. And if everyone lived that way, then there would really be no vulnerability. It would just be simply, well, this is how I'm
You'd be
feeling.
being
But
you.
You'll just be being you.
And
But
what
because
he said, he's interestingly earlier, when you mentioned, both you touched on it, is that people, I guess, and women being vulnerable for reward systems or dopamine or even internal things that you're not necessarily looking for a reward, but you're conditioned in your mind that when you act a certain way or you may feel a certain way, and men may not have that because we are conditioned differently. But I think it could even go further on beyond a reward system. There may even be a penalty system for men being too vulnerable, because not only may I not be rewarded, but I may incur problems from being too vulnerable. Let's say from my wife, where, she could tell me to my face that, oh, it's good when you are open with me, whatever. But then all of a sudden, in her mind, like, that man is less attractive to me now because he's not a man.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. It is a very simple, not complex thing to say, and people rip it apart in today's society. But just saying things like man up or be a man, you can differ on what that might actually mean, but there is definitely something to being a man and being a woman.
Correct.
And
Agreed.
it is okay to be manly, whatever we determine that to be. If you take it back to our most base primal, like evolution or whatever it is you want to call it, there's definitely differences in being a man and a woman. And for sure, there's situations you could put yourself into by expressing too much or moving in a certain way that the average woman will definitely, even if they don't tell you to your face, may see you as not as fit to be a partner or not as sexually attractive,
Correct.
just because you're acting too much like them.
Correct. Now,
You
we use, you said words like manly and so on. What's your definition of a man?
Well,
Somebody with a penis.
yeah,
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I mean, definition of, yes, that is my definition of man. You were born, barring anomalies and exceptions of people born with two genders or no gender or something that is not usual. But yes, you were born to your parent and you came out with a penis or vagina. You are as such.
So to you, there's no difference between man things and women things, because even when we use the word about get in touch with your feminine side, what is that? What is your feminine side? Because if I'm getting in touch with my emotion, right, and I want to cry, does that mean that that's a feminine side of me, or is that simply part of being a man, part of being a human, part of
I think that's the human side.
But yet still it's another term. You say, I need to get more in touch with my feminine side, as if that's some sort of trait of weakness.
It's
Sometimes
as humans, as an evolved species, we just term everything and we have to create language and words, and therefore we label everything. And
Which me thinking about is all of these terms and labels could really be just dotishness now. Why I say that? Because if everybody in the world had one standard, we say vulnerability, every single person will know what that means and set the standard, then okay. But if vulnerability in Port of Spain could be different from vulnerability in San Fernando to Guyana to the US to thing, then all of these terms really, it leaves open us to be confused. And of course now, because the world is smaller, meaning in terms of technology and especially social media, because I'm sure we could put in our word vulnerability and get about 10, 20, 30 different interpretations of it. And then, okay, this one resonates with me now. And an hour later, the next one resonates with me. And at the end of the day, when you ask the person, well, what is vulnerability? They don't know.
also, too, we live in a society now, when you search those 30 different terms of it, you'll find 30 million different people who might fight it to the death to support their term, and your term is in no way correct.
But as I say, Alan, what you look for is what you'll find. So in the same way, if you are, for example, in the United States, if you are particularly inclined to say the Democrats, you might watch a particular station, you might look at certain talk shows, etc. If you're inclined to the views of the Republicans, you're going to look at particular views and that. So therefore, it's the same thing when you're searching for something. I could take any viewpoint, and if I search enough, I'm going to come up with some article. It might be the mainstream articles, but to come and say, hey, look, somebody shared this and felt a particular way. But I know we need to go to a break. But at the same time, you said something in earlier where you said about how you feel about your son now and how you feel and how your wife feels about the son, that they're the most important thing in the world, right? It's interesting because in conversations that we've had here on Manhood and research that we've done, there are different viewpoints as we're now speaking about with regards to that. So, with those with religious beliefs, I mean, for me, I know God is the boss and everybody else just pretending, right? And so it's God first. You're supposed to then love yourself. Now, notice I said supposed to, because not everybody feels that way, right? And then most people will tell you children. But, therapists, and you could speak more about this, Johan, or research would show that if you focus on your relationship, your children will be happy and thrive. But if you focus on your children, right, it can lead to problems in your relationship, right? So there's a certain science behind that. So in terms of that love, I totally understand where you're coming from, because it is unconditional. No matter what, with your partner, it's conditional. Even though you might love them, you could say you're in love. There's conditions, right? But your child, it's unconditional. There's a mass that's removed that you can't even imagine that you're now touching base with regards to. I didn't know this existed, right? But at the same time, we've discussed it already on Manhood, where not everyone immediately feels that connection, and you wonder why. But that's a whole.
You're completely correct. And what you said is, when my son was born, I loved him. But if I didn't love him how I was telling myself I have to love you so much.
Yes.
Whereas my wife was already flat out in love. It's in her stomach, everything. Yes. And when he's born, but as it went and grew and months passed, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, okay, now there's again heavy boy, know.
And when he starts to talk to you.
And oh God, well, I didn't start yet. But and what you just said there too, though, but I did make the comment earlier, there's nothing like the love for my son from me, my wife and I, but I do internally believe, first of all, that has to be a heavy focus on the marriage, because the marriage is tested with children and all the time, every day. And I think it is somewhat important individually to always be somewhat selfish. I think we can't help but be selfish. But if you're not loving yourself or you're not happy in life, then you can't do nothing for your son and wife anyway if you are not selfishly taking care of yourself.
You can't give what you don't have.
Exactly. There's the compromise. Yeah. You can't go full out on yourself all the time, but you have to. Even my wife told me literally yesterday, I went to take a surf. I ain't surfing in a while. I was feeling indoors, like I'm not doing nothing. I was agitated and moody and moving around the house, annoying everybody probably. And I went to take I was like, I had to go outside the sunshine. I want to go and do activity. Came home, felt great. And I was like, thanks to my wife. Thank you for not getting on in any kind of way that I just felt to go and do something. And you had to kind of, deal with him and do your work for the day. And she's like, no, well, she's like, when you are a better person, then you're better for us. And she literally told me that. And she's told me that multiple times. And that is fact. Some people see it as you're being too selfish for yourself or you're not doing certain things, but you really do have to kind of sort yourself before you can really help others or be certain things to others.
Sometimes, they always say you can't see the trees inside the forest, or you can't see the picture from inside the frame. So sometimes you have to take a step back, take that moment for yourself, course correct, gather your thoughts, and then go back in again and engage. But you aren't saying we need to go to a break, but if you could just give us your thoughts on that and
You sure you want to give my thoughts now, because that's long before the break, but I'll give the thought. We should love ourselves first, right? And my wife told me this already. She said that love yourself first, but not only, right? And I'm saying that because if men supposed to be the head of the home, we have to be the best for ourselves first, because if we have to protect everyone else, and then most times we could lean maybe on our wives and others for support, but most times we are the person being leaned on. So we have to make sure we first. And then I agree with you, because I've seen it too many times. Parents are staying together for the children, right? And of course, I've never seen it work.
No.
I don't know if it ever work, and I don't know if there's stats out there, but I've never seen it work. Versus, which I've seen work, two people decide this thing not working, we happier separately, and beautiful co-parenting. Now, we put in it that way because even being vulnerable, sometimes being vulnerable is saying, are really not happy in this relationship. It doesn't mean it have to end, but the issue has to be raised, which is the vulnerability part. So at least we could have the discussion. Because if I don't know you're not happy,
You had to address it.
then I can't really do anything.
Yeah.
And if I don't know you're not happy, we can't do anything about it. So even if you're afraid of next thing, if I see this boy, he or she might leave me, or he or she might get angry. It's better you be vulnerable. It out there so that it can have even some sort of solution, even if it's breakup. It
That's
might
a solution too. If
right?
it's not working, you can't. Why stay in miserableness and things that are affecting, let's say, the child or
especially
anything.
the child.
Yeah.
And even though some parents say, I want to leave my child out of our business, if you and your partner are not happy, it becomes the child business. And let me tell you worse yet. If a child don't know what's going on, the child start to assume things. And most times, they assume the wrong thing. And let me tell you, 90% of the times, somehow the child is blaming themselves. Something I not doing right, or it's because of me,
It's leading
mommy
to
and
this.
daddy.
You
So
see that all
instead
the
of
time.
leaving your child to all of those anxious thoughts, I'm not saying you have to tell your child exactly husband and wife business, but at least you could say, well, mommy and daddy having a disagreement. So and it's not you, we dealing with our whatever it is, and that also that's being vulnerable to your child also.
And honest.
And honest, and therefore you'll have a better result. So this is Manhood, and we head into the break.
Nicely.
Welcome back to Manhood. Today we're discussing vulnerability. And I will start it off by being vulnerable for today, right? Today, I am struggling with unforgiveness, right? I could conceptually hear your apology, but if I still have the emotional charge, then I haven't forgiven you. If also I haven't forgiven myself for allowing you or allowing myself to be in this situation, then I still don't have that forgiveness. And I say that because I remember sometime I expressed something about unforgiveness and somebody tell me, because of my profession, I supposed to be able to deal with that one time now, right? And I realized when we were discussing before about the society to really reward you or facilitate people being vulnerable. And no matter what position you're in, most times you are pedestalized, especially if you're in the public eye in some way, right? Even if it's on a small scale, you're pedestalized in some way, which people hold you more than human. So you're supposed to behave more than human, which of course is erroneous because what else are we, right? And now some people have difficulty being themselves because they may be penalized for it. So use a big XYZ and you struggle with unforgiveness. Use a big XYZ and you feel to cry or you get vexed or you whatever it is that actually make us, I don't want to say normal person, but just like everyone else, just having a different
Accepted,
position.
maybe.
So you brought up something there that we hear it all the time, Alan, Johan say, where people go, who you to give me advice, or who you to say this, or like you tell somebody about smoking bad for you, but then you smoking, right? What stops you from being able to still say something is bad for you or something is good for you because you yourself mightn't have taken the advice? Doesn't mean that the information isn't accurate. Sometimes they say don't shoot the messenger. The
Do
message.
as I say, not as I do.
But it's still, you know what I mean? Like you can still come out and tell somebody, yeah, but the truth is, in your case, being having this science background, being a behavior change consultant, if you say certain things, what I would say to you is, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be going through hard times, doesn't mean that you're not human. What it would be is you're more in touch as to the why certain things are happening, but doesn't mean that you're still not going to feel pain, and that advice is not always, I could give advice. I mean, as I mentioned at the start of the show, I have expressed many times on this show, many times with the brothers that have passed through the show, as to why you should reach out to your brotherhood, why you should be vulnerable, why you should communicate, express, talk with each other, be that brotherhood which we lack in today's world, because it's like, well, I better you than me, yes, and we're not talking about what we're going through. But at the same time, doesn't mean that I'm not human and I'm not going to sit down in a dark room at some certain points and cry about it, or feel or feel less than, But in the same space, it's not, we spoke about, where we talk about complaining, and you had mentioned it on a show, and I told you I had a problem with that, where you said complaining makes you less than a man. And as you mentioned about being
I don't know if
human,
that was my exact line, but we're going with that.
like when you said being human, like whatever I am doing, I am a man. It doesn't take away the fact that, I have vulnerability in that sense, or I have weakness. Now, in this case, there's a difference between vulnerability and weakness, because I would think quarreling and complaining is a form of weakness, because you're out of control and you could be
A mental weakness.
A mental weakness.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on?
And also, well, even as you just said there, to complaining, it is not necessarily being less of a man, but then I guess there's that divide that factually you're not less of a man because you're still a man, you complain, but you may very well be perceived as less of a man by whoever, maybe women.
And that is the crux of being vulnerable. Because let's just say I am feeling weak in the moment. And the truth is, today I'm feeling weak. That's the truth. I can't help that fact. And if somebody judges me negatively for feeling weak in that moment, what can I do?
Yeah, the verdict is out.
What can I do in that moment? Or if, let's just say, I have poor time management skills. In that moment, I have poor time management skills. So pretending that I don't, or pretending that I'm quote-unquote better at something than I'm not. To me, I'm realizing now, years now, but it hitting home as I am becoming more vulnerable. Hiding things don't really make any sense.
No.
Because even how I'll get help, if I have poor time management skills, many people might say, well, he always late and he get vexed with me. And then one person might be, actually, you know what? I could help you out. But if I didn't display it or wasn't vulnerable, then I wouldn't even open myself to help. Now, open myself to hurt and ridicule also. But I guess that's a missing element that the dictionary don't have, because the dictionary said opening it to harm or possible danger. But the truth is, vulnerability also opening it to possible assistance.
Yeah, and everything you said is also like inward looking, but vulnerability, while it could easily bring backlash or not positive things, it could also bring a lot of good. So my wife and I, we didn't necessarily have trouble getting pregnant, but it was becoming, so we did IVF in Colombia. IVF, anybody who doesn't know, is basically like not artificial, but they help you get pregnant using science. That's the best way to put it, right? And normally people who have a lot of trouble getting pregnant, that is like your last resort or your last attempt, and it don't even always work out. We were on the fence, like we still could get pregnant naturally, but it was becoming a damn chore every day. Like every time she ovulated or whatever, it's like, oh, now we have to do this thing. And I was like, I'll eat a big Chinese food and not in the mood for that or whatever. And it's killing all the love and the romance in the relationship.
Because it's business now.
And then, but of course too, so you're forced into doing things, and then her period comes, so she's not pregnant, and then of course the women get very emotional and they have that dark cloud hanging over your house. So I told her, I was like, let me try and throw money at it. When I say, not that we have a set of money, but I was like, you know what? Like, let's try this way. Because she was asking her doctor about all kind of things, and they had this step, and the last step was IVF. I was like, well, why don't we jump over all that and put all the money that would cost for very low success rates, and let's try something different.
That's a big man thing.
And we went for it, and it was a real serious roller coaster. I did not research it enough, however. I really thought you go there, you pay your money, and you have like a 90% chance. Wrong, real wrong. You can lose all your money. You cannot get through easily. People and injections for 2 weeks straight in wife's stomach, 3 injections a day. I have to apply some of the injections at night. I have a thing of needles. It was real bacchanal. I was underprepared completely. But the point I'm making about it, let me fast forward that. We, thank God, got a son out of it. But most importantly, IVF is another taboo thing. People are ashamed to talk about it. It's almost like something wrong with you, or if you're very religious, you're only supposed to do it through God, blah, 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 whatever. Did it, and we were super open about it, or vulnerable about it. Spoke about it all the time, and I can't tell you the amount of people, women and men, but women who have contacted myself and my wife who just dying to get pregnant to find out, and they felt like they could not speak to anybody about taking that route. And they just like behind the scenes praise you and crying, super emotional that, let's say, brave enough, although we don't consider bravery, but they consider us being brave for even putting that out there that we went that path now.
I totally agree with you, Alan, because I started late in life. I have a 7-year-old now, and I started late in comparison to a lot of other friends who would have had 20-year-olds and so on by now. And part of a man is always wondering if your boy is swimming, right? And whether, because you want to see your likeness and image. So even though, like, I'm glad you also mentioned it about when your child is born, what you're concerned with at that point is 10 fingers, 10 toes. And you hear people say about, oh, the love was immediate. And I, like you, it took me a while to the point that, I'm totally in love with my son. But it wasn't immediate.
No.
And one of the things that you do in that case is immediate. It's protection. It's their life and all the rest of it. You go into that aspect of a man, but there were concerns that initially was like, all right, well, she's not the first woman I've been with. I haven't always put on the Jimmy hat, as some people say, and what was happening here. And I know a lot of brothers who have that conversation, who may not have children right now, who are concerned with, can I have children, and am I willing to talk about it, and what if I can't? What is it then? Does that make you less of a man at that point?
And it's something you have to talk. Have to is a strong word, but especially if you look in relationship and marriage, and I think that should be one of the things when you're looking to spend your life with somebody. That could be a huge thing if you're not on the same page. What do you want children? Yes or no? If one is yes and one is no, you're setting yourself up to a real back and all there one time. Then what happens if we can't? And wife, I know you're watching, but my wife is very on point with things. She understands that we talk. And there was a point in time that her dream was to be a mother. And I was cool with it. I was like, but I told her from myself, I was like, if children do come, I'm happy to spend all our money on us and travel the world and all that kind of thing, if it came to that. She was not about that if at all. She was ready to not be happy if children were not coming, as I imagine a lot of women are.
A lot of people, a lot of men and women, not just where men want to see, they want to spread their seed.
And it was a hard conversation.
And if you're not able to do that, then it's a case of, and what about men who, in a situation like yours now, if it's taken, there are people that might now say, well, okay, we've gone through this for one, but I see myself with 3-4 children, and you can't provide that now. What's the situation then? Are you vulnerable enough to have that conversation, have that real conversation, or live a full life?
And that's the thing, I say full life because I remember this. I think this happened twice. I remember dealing with a couple and they couldn't. Well, they wasn't conceiving, and the man was vehement. It's not him. It can't be him.
Can't be you.
And down to the wire until they actually went and realized his sperm count was low. And even then, he trying to still be in denial. But I understood because it came from a place of pride. Now, I'm saying this because more and more realizing the power, especially as men, to be vulnerable. And even though it opens you to the possibility of danger and harm and ridicule, I think is also a liberating thing. Because every single time I have been vulnerable has been freeing to me. Even if it opens me to criticism, but after I say it, I am lighter. Because
it's your truth.
When we lie, listen, biologically, when you lie, right, it actually sends a stress signal to your nervous system, right? Because literally, because your body want to do this, but you do something else. So literally, you're in contradiction with who you are. And if we want to go a little esoteric with science, right? And so people hear about the law of attraction already, right? If you want to attract what is really for your life, then it had to be you. Because if you be something else than Robert, then you're attracting something else. If you be something else than Alan, you're attracting something else. And if I be someone else, I'm attracting someone else. And then you will wonder, well, why things that happening for me in my life? Why thing that XYZ is because somewhere in your life you're not being authentically you.
Well, as you speak about being esoteric, you're talking about in your mind, your body subconscious packed away this memory. This has happened. This has occurred. So it knows this is the way forward. So when you're now coming to create something that the body's like, but that's not the path we went down, or that's not the road, it's really this road. So you're not, which is a lie, because you're now trying to create a narrative that's the body, as you said, and the spirit and the grounding and the universe and everything knows, but it's this way. And you're now trying to do something that's not necessarily beneficial
You're lying
to
to
your
yourself.
being, and you're lying to yourself, and that's why you're putting your body into
And if
into
I
a
could
real
just,
struggle.
and something you just said there too, like just to weigh in on it a little bit, I completely agree that it is a great place to be able to reach a point in life where you could be vulnerable and very honest, outwardly, inwardly, of course, most important. But social media and life, more importantly, like prior to my wife and everything, like most people, but everybody has a different path. I went through some hard breakups and some real dongs, and I've been to put myself into therapy and thing, which really helped and everything too. And my mind has become very, very strong over the years. Like I'm very mentally strong. And I do think that everybody should aim to train their mind via therapy, via knowledge, anything that could help your mind.
Train your mind too by putting yourself in difficult situations.
Exactly.
And here's what's a difficult situation: being vulnerable.
No, exactly.
Correct.
But and what I was alluding to though is that when the time comes to, and you're right, it kind of works backwards on itself as well too, funnily enough. But I was going to say that, especially on social media, but even in real life, when you're going to be vulnerable, you have to be mentally strong enough to take what may come. Because if you are not in a good place mentally, and let me say you approach your wife, your girlfriend, your co-workers, whoever, and then you decide to be vulnerable or be honest, and their reaction is not what you may have hoped for in advance, and you can't deal with it. You have to be strong
That's
enough.
vulnerability.
Yes.
That's the meaning there.
Now-
So with that one,
Yeah. Go ahead.
closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. Well, first of all, fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for having me, both of you. I think this is good vibes, and I think in today's world, everybody's voice is obviously equally important, but for some reason it feels like men maybe need to have a bit more of a voice at this point in time, because it seems like, we getting put underneath the foot a little bit sometimes, as if, how it is, social media, one scroll and you can see a reason that is somehow bad to be a man. And I think, men, just like women, are fantastic people. Some people are bad, some are good. We can't break it down by gender and that kind of stuff. And just to end on my own personal note, which may not necessarily reflect everything we said here, is to say something to Trinidad and Tobago is I truly, with all of my heart, believe that Trinidad and Tobago is a paradise, one of the greatest places in the world, one of the best vibes in the world. We have a unique culture, a unique accent. People love us whenever we travel. And it's really time to start doing away with all this corruption and crime and bacchanal, where everybody hating on us and everybody out for each other, and the negativity that we sit and stew in every day because of this and the press saying that and who dead and who whatnot. I truly believe that everybody just change your mentality a little bit, clean up after yourself, get outside, get in touch with nature, the beaches, the rivers, Politicians are speaking to you too. People who are considered criminals in society who maybe want to move away from that life, make the harder choice, don't pocket that money, don't make the wrong choice, fight your way out of it if you can. And Trinidad and Tobago could really be a place where everybody who's looking on the outside now saying, ways, boy, that's too dangerous to go there, or I ain't going there, will turn around and say, ways, how I could retire there, how can I be a part of that country who has everything from the climate to the beaches, to the rivers, to the food, to the land, to the wildlife, everything going on, the culture, the mix of people, the food. We really have everything almost better than most places in the world, except we like to all over ourselves, and some people more than others within the country. So asking again, people with power, people with no power, and everybody in between, recognize Trinidad and Tobago for what it is, show a little bit more love, and get out and explore your country and keep it clean. That's my feelings.
Powerful. I mean, it still is sweet TNT. And you mentioned people who have power and people who have no power. Everybody has power. You have power of yourself, you have power of your voice.
Yes.
Stand up and be heard. As we talk about here, talk about vulnerability, about living your truth. Living your truth is what's really, really important. And the vulnerability, as we look at it from a position, it's a position of emotional intelligence. Don't look at it as a sign of weakness. As a matter of fact, being vulnerable to your peers, to your community, to your partner, to yourself is also a sign of trust. It's a sign of respect that people will then have for you. And if you're not getting that respect, you're not feeling that trust in that atmosphere, that environment, then guess what? That's not the community for you. And you need to move to one that allows you to be vulnerable, that allows you to live your truth. And so, if you don't know, ask a question. We sit here a lot of times as men, and we joke about it all the time about not wanting to ask for something as simple as directions. Why not? If you don't know, there's no shame in asking. There's a lot of respect in that, in owning up to something. Now, if I told you once and I told you twice, then that's something a bit different. You're then ignorant to the fact. And there's a reason why you might not want to be taking on that particular knowledge. But there's no shame in the game in asking. There's nothing like, getting in touch with your feminine side. It's simply getting in touch with your side. That's not a sign of weakness, but a sign of openness and a sign of, once again, living your truth.
Gentlemen, I appreciate you all being vulnerable. I appreciate also the opportunity for me to be vulnerable, because every time we do it, we practicing it and we become better at it, and therefore becoming better as men. And those viewing, especially young men and boys into men, be yourself. We may not get the respect and the admiration from everyone for being ourselves, but at least we could respect ourselves, because sometimes the worst thing is in a situation where you should be vulnerable, you should speak your truth, and you don't. And even though you mightn't face the immediate repercussion, you feel less of a man. So I would say, we always ask the question, what is a man? In this situation, I'm saying to be a man is to be able to have the courage to speak your truth, the courage to be vulnerable, no matter the possible consequences. This is Manhood. Thank you very much for viewing.
Manhood, brought to you in part by Reboot Sports Drink. Manhood, brought to you in part by Solomon's Bespoke.